November 27, 1944, a single formation of American P-51 Mustangs encountered a massive Luftwaffe fighter group over Germany, and in mere minutes, German pilots watched in horror as 40 of their aircraft fell from the sky in what survivors could only describe as systematic annihilation, not aerial combat. But the real shock for these elite German pilots didn't come during the battle. It came months later when they became American POWs and discovered the devastating truth about why they never stood a chance. What did these captured Luftwaffe aces learn about American power while eating ice cream in a Louisiana prison camp that their own propaganda had hidden from them?
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. November 1944. The war was dying, but nobody told the young men climbing into their cockpits at Sternad Airfield. They still believed in German steel and German skill. They still thought the Luftwaffe ruled the skies. Oberleutnant Hans Weick knew better, but he kept his mouth shut and his engine running. The base looked tired. Paint peeled from hangar walls. Oil stains marked the concrete where mechanics worked through frozen nights keeping ancient fighters alive. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with wood smoke from heating stoves. Winter was coming early to central Germany, and everything felt colder than it should. Weick was 24 years old and already felt ancient. He had flown over the burning steppes of Russia. He had dodged British Spitfires over the Channel. 12 enemy aircraft carried his bullets into the ground, and an Iron Cross hung heavy on his chest. Other pilots looked at him like he held secrets to staying alive. Maybe he did. Maybe the secret was just dumb luck, and his was running out. The new pilots scared him most. Boys really, 18 and 19 years old, fresh from training schools that had stopped teaching anything useful months ago. They got 30 hours in the air if they were lucky, 50 if someone important liked them. Weick remembered his own training before the war. 200 hours, proper instruction, time to learn how a fighter moved and breathed and killed. These kids barely knew how to hold formation. They looked at him with shining eyes and asked stupid questions about glory. There was no glory left, just mathematics. The Americans had more planes, more fuel, more everything. They replaced losses faster than Germany could count them. But the Führer demanded miracles, and young men died trying to deliver them. The experienced pilots knew. They saw it in the replacement numbers, in the empty beds at breakfast, in the way commanders stopped learning new names. That morning started like any other dying day. Frost covered the grass. Mechanics cursed at cold engines. Someone made weak coffee from grounds used 3 times already. The briefing room smelled like unwashed bodies and fear disguised as confidence. 40 pilots crowded wooden benches, breath fogging in the unheated space. The intelligence officer looked even more tired than usual. His uniform hung loose. Everyone was losing weight. He pointed at a map with a wooden stick, tapping cities that meant nothing anymore. Americans were coming. Big formation. Heavy bombers probably heading for Hanover or beyond. The Luftwaffe would intercept, stop them, turn them back. The usual impossible orders delivered in a flat voice that expected nothing. Weick studied the younger pilots while the briefing droned on. They sat straight, eager, ready to prove themselves. One kid couldn't have been more than 17, lying about his age like they all did now. Baby fat still rounded his cheeks. He wore his flight suit like a costume, too big in the shoulders. Weick wanted to tell him to run, to hide, to be anywhere but here. Instead, he checked his watch and said nothing. The mission was simple on paper. Form up, find the bombers, attack before their fighter escorts arrived. Get in, get kills, get out. Except the escorts always arrived now. The Americans had fighters that could fly all the way to Berlin and back. They had fuel to burn and pilots who trained for a year before seeing combat. They had radios that worked and replacement parts that arrived on time. Germany had desperation and ideology and boys in outdated aircraft. Walking to his Messerschmitt Bf 109, Wyke noticed details that stuck in memory like broken glass. The way morning light caught frost on the wings. A mechanic's hands shaking from cold or fear or both. The sound of engines coughing to life, one after another. A ragged chorus that once sounded powerful and now just sounded old. His own aircraft, number 13, wore patches over patches. The mechanics did their best. Their best wasn't enough anymore. Climbing into the cockpit felt like climbing into a coffin. The thought came unbidden and unwelcome. Wyke shoved it down, focused on familiar routines. Straps tight, stick responsive, gauges reading normal or what passed for normal. Fuel tanks half full because there wasn't enough to fill them. Ammunition loaded, but fewer rounds than last month. Everything rationed, everything scarce, everything running on fumes and wishes. The radio crackled, formation leaders calling positions. Wyke led his small group, 3 aircraft including his own, 2 inexperienced pilots who would follow him and probably die doing it. He'd tried to teach them something yesterday, basic defensive maneuvers, how to watch their tail, when to break off and run. They'd nodded and smiled and understood nothing that mattered. Takeoff happened in organized chaos, 40 fighters climbing into gray sky, forming up in groups heading west towards the bombers. Wyke watched the ragged formation and felt something break inside. They looked impressive maybe from the ground. From up here, he saw the truth. Half these pilots couldn't maintain proper spacing. A quarter would get lost in clouds. The rest would panic at first contact and either freeze or do something stupid.
The sky stretched empty and cold around them. 10,000 feet up, the world looked clean. No bomb craters, no burning cities, no refugees choking the roads. Just clouds and distant horizon and the steady drone of engines that burned fuel Germany couldn't replace. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. Radio chatter picked up. Someone spotted the bombers, a formation of American B-17s flying their tight defensive boxes like they owned the sky. Maybe they did. The Luftwaffe fighters adjusted course, angling for attack position. Wyke felt his heart rate increase despite years of experience. The fear never went away. You just learned to function inside it. Then the radio exploded with voices. Panicked, urgent, words tumbling over each other. Mustangs! Mustangs in the area! Someone gave a position. Someone else screamed a warning. Wyke's head snapped right, left, searching sky that suddenly felt too big and too small at the same time. He saw them emerging from cloud cover like wolves from fog. Not 5 or 10 P-51 Mustangs, not the usual escort group. A wall of them. 20, 30, maybe more. Silver aircraft in perfect formation, diving with the sun behind them. Professional, coordinated, hunting. Everything Wyke knew about aerial combat told him the truth in one terrible instant. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution. The Americans had numbers, position, surprise, and aircraft that could outperform everything Germany put in the air. His formation of green pilots and patched fighters didn't stand a chance. The first kills happened so fast that Wyke barely processed them. Tracers reached out like fingers of light. A Focke-Wulf 190 to his left simply came apart, pieces spinning into clouds below. Another Messerschmitt tried to turn, too slow, and a Mustang was already there, guns hammering. Parachute deployed. Small mercy in a massacre. Wyke shouted into his radio, orders that nobody could follow because there were no orders for this. Break formation, evade, run, survive. His 2 wingmen scattered like startled birds.
One made it maybe 10 seconds before American guns found him. The other disappeared into clouds, and WWII never knew if he escaped or just died where nobody could see. The sky filled with chaos, German fighters spinning, burning, falling, parachutes blooming like funeral flowers, Mustangs everywhere, efficient and deadly, picking targets with calm precision. WWII counted falling aircraft because his brain needed something to hold on to. 15, 20, 25, numbers that couldn't be real, but were. He dove hard, engine screaming, trying to reach cloud cover. Tracers zipped past his canopy. A Mustang stayed on him, patient, waiting for a clean shot. WWII threw his aircraft into maneuvers that stressed old metal past safe limits. Something rattled, something else cracked. The Mustang stayed with him, better aircraft flown by better trained pilot with fuel to spare. Only luck saved him. A cloud bank appeared like a gift from a god WWII had stopped believing in. He plunged into gray nothing, instruments spinning, losing all sense of up or down. The Mustang didn't follow. Why waste fuel on one kill when so many easier targets filled the sky? WWII broke through clouds at 3,000 feet, alone, lost, engine coughing. Below, German countryside rolled past, fields and villages that would learn about today's disaster soon enough. His radio picked up scattered transmissions, pilots calling for help that wouldn't come, someone counting the dead. The numbers kept climbing. 30, 35, 40 aircraft gone in minutes. He dove hard, engine screaming, trying to reach cloud cover. Tracers zipped past his canopy. A Mustang stayed on him, patient, waiting for a clean shot. WWII threw his aircraft into maneuvers that stressed old metal past safe limits. Something rattled, something else cracked. The Mustang stayed with him, better aircraft flown by better trained pilot with fuel to spare. Only luck saved him. A cloud bank appeared like a gift from a god WWII had stopped believing in. He plunged into gray nothing, instruments spinning, losing all sense of up or down. The Mustang didn't follow. Why waste fuel on one kill when so many easier targets filled the sky? WWII broke through clouds at 3,000 feet, alone, lost, engine coughing. Below, German countryside rolled past, fields and villages that would learn about today's disaster soon enough. His radio picked up scattered transmissions, pilots calling for help that wouldn't come, someone counting the dead. The numbers kept climbing. 30, 35, 40 aircraft gone in minutes. He dove hard, engine screaming, trying to reach cloud cover. Tracers zipped past his canopy. A Mustang stayed on him, patient, waiting for a clean shot. WWII threw his aircraft into maneuvers that stressed old metal past safe limits. Something rattled, something else cracked. The Mustang stayed with him, better aircraft flown by better trained pilot with fuel to spare. Only luck saved him. A cloud bank appeared like a gift from a god WWII had stopped believing in. He plunged into gray nothing, instruments spinning, losing all sense of up or down. The Mustang didn't follow. Why waste fuel on one kill when so many easier targets filled the sky? WWII broke through clouds at 3,000 feet, alone, lost, engine coughing. Below, German countryside rolled past, fields and villages that would learn about today's disaster soon enough. His radio picked up scattered transmissions, pilots calling for help that wouldn't come, someone counting the dead. The numbers kept climbing. 30, 35, 40 aircraft gone in minutes. He dove hard, engine screaming, trying to reach cloud cover. Tracers zipped past his canopy. A Mustang stayed on him, patient, waiting for a clean shot. WWII threw his aircraft into maneuvers that stressed old metal past safe limits. Something rattled, something else cracked. The Mustang stayed with him, better aircraft flown by better trained pilot with fuel to spare. Only luck saved him. A cloud bank appeared like a gift from a god Wyke had stopped believing in. He plunged into grey nothing, instruments spinning, losing all sense of up or down. The Mustang didn't follow. Why waste fuel on one kill when so many easier targets filled the sky? Wyke broke through clouds at 3,000 feet, alone, lost, engine coughing. Below, German countryside rolled past, fields and villages that would learn about today's disaster soon enough. His radio picked up scattered transmissions, pilots calling for help that wouldn't come, someone counting the dead. The numbers kept climbing. 30, 35, 40 aircraft gone in minutes. He crash-landed in a farmer's field, aircraft sliding through frozen mud before stopping against a fence. Wyke sat in the wreck, hands shaking, ears ringing, unable to process what he'd witnessed. The cockpit smelled like smoke and hot metal and fear. He unbuckled with numb fingers and crawled out onto cold ground. Standing in that field, looking up at contrails still marking the sky above, Wyke understood something that broke him more than the battle. This was the war now. German pilots dying in batches while Americans methodically cleared the sky. All the propaganda, all the promises, all the talk of wonder weapons and final victory. Lies, built on lies, while boys fell burning from clouds. What just happened to us, he thought. But he knew. Reality happened. Mathematics happened. America happened. With its endless factories and trained pilots and aircraft that worked. Germany's age of air superiority ended up there, in those contrails. 40 aircraft gone, and everyone who survived knew it, even if they wouldn't say it yet. The war was over. The dying just hadn't finished. American soldiers found Wyke 2 hours after the crash. He expected boots in his ribs and rifle butts to the head. War films and propaganda promised brutality from the enemy. Instead, a young corporal offered him a cigarette and a canteen of water. The cigarette was American, smooth and rich compared to the sawdust Germans smoked now. The water tasted clean, no chemical aftertaste from purification tablets. Wyke's hands still shook too much to light the cigarette himself, so the corporal did it for him. They processed him like factory workers handling cargo. Efficient, bored even, like capturing German pilots happened so often it barely registered. A sergeant checked him for weapons, took his Iron Cross without comment, wrote his name in a ledger. No anger, no triumph.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. An intelligence officer interviewed Wyke in a heated tent that smelled like coffee. Real coffee, the kind Wyke remembered from before the war, rich and dark and impossibly abundant. The officer poured 2 cups without asking, slid one across the table like they were old friends discussing weather. He spoke decent German, accent soft and American, nothing like the harsh commands Wyke expected. "We know about Stürmede," the officer said, shuffling papers. "Tough day for you guys on the 27th. He said it like discussing a sporting match, casual and almost sympathetic. Then he showed Wyke aerial photographs, sharp and detailed, taken from American reconnaissance aircraft that flew so high German fighters couldn't reach them. The images showed the entire battle from above, a god's-eye view of the slaughter. Gun camera footage came next, grainy black-and-white film from P-51 Mustangs. Wyke watched German aircraft explode on a small screen over and over, his friends and students and strangers dying in silent film loops. The officer kept a tally on paper, counting kills with a pencil, professional and detached. 43 confirmed, he said finally. Could be more, but some went down in clouds. 43. The number sat in Wyke's stomach like a stone.
The officer lit a cigarette, offered the pack to Wyke again. 56th Fighter Group, he explained. They're good. Your boys just weren't ready. Not an insult, just observation. Fact delivered without emotion. Wyke wanted to argue, to defend German training and German courage, but the evidence played on the screen behind him. Reality didn't care about pride. January brought the Atlantic crossing. Wyke boarded a Liberty ship expecting a prison hold, darkness and chains and minimum rations. Instead, Americans put POWs in converted troop quarters, bunks with mattresses, portholes with actual light. 3 meals daily arrived like clockwork, more food than German civilians saw in a week. Breakfast included eggs, real eggs, not the powder substitute that tasted like chalk. Lunch brought soup with actual meat floating in it. Dinner meant bread without sawdust, potatoes without rot. Wyke watched American sailors eat, fascinated and horrified. They took huge portions, ate half, threw the rest overboard like it meant nothing. Sandwiches with visible ham disappeared into Atlantic waves. Fruit, slightly bruised, followed into the depths. An entire tray of cornbread went over the side because someone made too much. They waste more than we have, Wyke thought, standing at the rail, watching abundance sink into dark water. The ship arrived at an American port, and the scale of everything overwhelmed him. Cranes lifted cargo containers the size of houses. Warehouses stretched beyond sight. Trains, dozens of them, waited to carry goods to places Wyke couldn't imagine. Germany had talked about American industrial weakness, Jewish-controlled incompetence, a nation too soft for real war. This port alone could supply armies that Germany couldn't feed. Camp Ruston in Louisiana hit different. Stepping off the train into humid January warmth felt wrong. Germany froze in winter, but here prisoners sweated in shirt sleeves. Pine forests surrounded the camp, tall and green, nothing like the blasted landscape Wyke left behind. The camp itself looked better than some German military bases he'd seen. Barracks with heating systems that worked, running water, hot and cold. An infirmary with medicine that wasn't expired or imaginary. The first meal at Ruston broke something in Wyke's understanding of the world. Fried chicken, golden and crispy, piled on plates like they had chickens to spare. Mashed potatoes with real butter melting on top. Vegetables green and fresh, not canned or rotten. Bread white and soft, unlimited. Milk in glass bottles, cold and clean. And then dessert, ice cream, 3 flavors, served to prisoners like it was normal. Wyke stared at the ice cream melting in his bowl. They give frozen cream to prisoners, he thought. His mind couldn't process it. Germany rationed butter to fighting soldiers. America served ice cream to captured enemies. The mathematics didn't work. The propaganda didn't work. Nothing he'd been told about American weakness survived contact with a dessert spoon. Work detail sent him to a local lumber mill, where American industry revealed itself in casual detail. Machines cut wood with precision German factories couldn't match. Electric saws, newer than anything Wyke saw in aircraft plants back home, operated all day without breaking. The civilian supervisor, a man too old for military service, brought lunch for the work crew. Sandwiches thick with meat, apples so red they looked painted, and glass bottles of Coca-Cola beaded with condensation. The supervisor's son arrived at the mill, bringing forgotten tools his father left at home. The boy drove his own automobile, a Ford, maybe 3 years old, handling it with the casual confidence of someone who'd been driving for years. The boy looked 16 at most. Wyke watched this teenager park a personal car in wartime while Germany struggled to fuel military vehicles. A boy has his own car, Wyke thought. A boy in wartime. The contrast crushed him.
That night in the barracks, Wyke lay on his mattress, a real mattress, not straw, and tried to make sense of it. Germany told them America was weak, divided, corrupted by inferior races and Jewish influence. But here, teenage boys drove cars. Prisoners ate ice cream. Factories ran at impossible scale without strain. Everything was backwards. Everything was a lie. The war wasn't lost because Germans lacked courage or skill. It was lost because they fought a nation that could feed its enemies better than Germany fed. Because American abundance was so vast, they threw food into the ocean. Because they built empires of steel and never broke a sweat. Wyke closed his eyes, but couldn't sleep. Tomorrow would bring more impossible contrasts, more evidence that everything he believed was fiction. The 40 aircraft that fell on November 27th were just the beginning. The real defeat happened here, in a Louisiana prison camp, over fried chicken and ice cream, where a German pilot learned that propaganda dies when it meets reality, and reality tastes like Coca-Cola served cold to the conquered.
Thanksgiving 1945 arrived with smells that reminded Wyke of childhood before the war ruined everything. The camp mess hall filled with scents of roasted turkey, sweet potatoes, something called stuffing that he'd never heard of before. The war was over. Germany surrendered months ago. The prisoners would go home soon, back to a country that existed only in rubble and memory. But today, the Americans insisted on celebration. Long tables groaned under impossible weight. Whole turkeys, golden brown and glistening, lined up like soldiers on parade. Mountains of mashed potatoes sat in bowls bigger than helmets. Cranberry sauce, bright red and strange, filled dishes that caught the light. Pies covered an entire table by themselves. Pumpkin, apple, pecan, names Wyke recognized but had never tasted. Gravy boats, literal boats of rich brown sauce, waited at every setting. The abundance hurt to look at. The camp commanders stood to speak, a colonel whose name Wyke never bothered learning. The man looked tired, ready to go home himself, ready for this war to truly end. He kept the speech short. "War's over," he said. "You'll go home soon. Today, we're grateful for peace. Nothing about victory, nothing about triumph or superiority or defeated enemies. Just gratitude that the killing stopped." Wyke waited for mockery that never came, for gloating that remained silent. Prisoners filled their plates because the Americans expected it, because refusing seemed insulting somehow. Wyke took turkey that fell apart at his fork's touch. He spooned potatoes that tasted like butter and cream and impossibility. The cranberry sauce confused him, sweet and tart at the same time, nothing like food should be. Everything was hot, fresh, prepared that morning by cooks who treated POW meals like they mattered. Eating felt wrong. His mother was starving in Bremen. His former wingmen were dead or digging through ruins for scraps. Here sat Wyke, enemy prisoner, consuming a feast that German officers couldn't imagine. The turkey tasted like betrayal. The pie tasted like lies he'd believed. Every bite reminded him that Germany lost more than the war. They lost the understanding of what power actually meant. That night, alone in the barracks, Wyke pulled out the diary he'd hidden from guards. Contraband, technically, but the Americans didn't search hard, didn't care much what prisoners wrote in secret notebooks. He needed to record this, needed words to capture what was breaking inside his head. The pencil felt heavy. The paper seemed too white, too clean, like everything else in this country. "We were told America was weak," he wrote. The words came slowly at first, then faster, spilling out like confession. "We were told they were decadent, divided by mongrel races, too soft for real sacrifice. We were told our spirit would overcome their materialism. We were told so many things, and every single thing was a lie." His hand moved across the page, forming letters that felt like treason and truth at the same time. I have seen the real America now. They fed us better than our own army fed its soldiers. They gave us ice cream while German children starved. They heated our barracks while Berlin froze. They treated us with casual indifference, like defeating Germany required so little effort they barely noticed doing it. The memory of November 27th filled his mind, those 40 aircraft falling like leaves in autumn wind. The men who shot them down were fighting with endless fuel, he wrote. Perfect machines, months of training, radio equipment that worked, replacement parts that arrived on schedule. We sent boys with 30 hours in obsolete planes held together with lies and hope. WWII paused, pencil hovering over paper, trying to capture the core truth that haunted him. We didn't lose because they were stronger, he finally wrote. We lost because we were lied to about everything. About their weakness, about our superiority, about what victory required, about reality itself. The education program started as curiosity and became obsession. Camp administrators offered classes, English, mathematics, American civics, and WWII attended because barracks life drove him slowly mad. The instructor was a former college professor, drafted into uniform, teaching enemy prisoners because someone decided education mattered, even here. The man spoke clearly, without condescension, treating German POWs like students instead of defeated enemies. American civics confused WWII most. The instructor explained federalism, separate states with separate laws, power divided and shared, and he talked about free press, newspapers that criticized the government without fear. He described elections where people actually chose leaders, where power changed hands without violence. WWII had learned this was weakness, chaos, Jewish corruption of natural order. But somehow, this chaotic system built the nation that buried Germany in steel. The instructor brought Life magazines, glossy and thick, filled with photographs that seemed too perfect to be real. American factories, massive beyond comprehension, producing cars and planes and everything else. Farms stretching to horizons, machines harvesting grain in fields that dwarfed anything in Europe. Universities, huge and beautiful, full of students who looked well-fed and confident. Women in factories, doing men's work, while men fought overseas. Everything wrong according to what Germany taught, everything working according to what WWII could see. One photograph stuck in his mind, a production line making B-17 bombers, the same planes WWII had tried to shoot down. The factory floor stretched beyond the camera's view. Dozens of aircraft in various stages of assembly, workers swarming over them like ants, everything clean and impossibly efficient. The caption said this was one factory, one. America had dozens. WWII stared at that photograph until the instructor moved on to other topics. This nation fought a two-ocean war, he realized, and never strained. They fought Germany and Japan simultaneously, supplied Britain and Russia, fed their people, gave their teenagers personal automobiles, and still had enough left over to serve ice cream to prisoners. The war wasn't even hard for them, not really, just expensive and annoying, like swatting flies that refused to die quickly. He tried writing a letter home that night, knowing it would never be sent, knowing his mother couldn't handle these truths. Dear Mutty, the letter started, I don't know how to tell you what I've learned here. How do you explain to a starving woman that the enemy fed you better than your own country ever did? How do you tell her that everything she believed, everything she sacrificed for, was built on lies? Everything we were told was backwards, he wrote, words he could never mail. The weak Americans built an empire of abundance, while the master race sent children to die in obsolete planes. Those 40 aircraft we lost in minutes, that was the entire war in miniature. Delusion meeting reality. Pride meeting mathematics, ideology meeting industrial capacity. The letter remained unfinished, hidden in the diary, confession without recipient. Wyke lay on his bunk, staring at ceiling boards that didn't leak, in a room that stayed warm without effort, eating 3 meals daily while Germany starved. He had survived the war only to have everything he understood destroyed by the peace. Tomorrow would bring more classes, more evidence, more truth that felt like betrayal. But tonight, Wyke understood something simple and terrible. The real defeat wasn't losing the war. The real defeat was learning that everything you fought for was a lie, and the enemies you hated were right all along. That truth tasted worse than any battle, cut deeper than any wound, and couldn't be fixed by courage or sacrifice, or anything except accepting that you were wrong about everything that mattered. The war was over. Understanding was just beginning. Spring 1946 brought repatriation and dread in equal measure. Wyke boarded another Liberty ship, this time heading east toward a home that existed only in photographs and fading memory. He carried American cigarettes for trading, chocolate bars for gifts, and the hidden diary that contained truths nobody wanted to hear. Other prisoners talked excitedly about seeing families, sleeping in their own beds, eating German food again. Wyke said nothing and watched the ocean pass. The ship docked at Bremen, and the devastation shocked even men who'd seen war's worst. The city wasn't damaged, it was erased. Entire neighborhoods existed only as rubble fields where buildings used to stand. Smoke still rose from some ruins months after the last bombs fell. People moved through the wreckage like ghosts, hollow-eyed and skeletal, wearing clothes that hung on frames too thin to be healthy. This was victory for Germany, survival in ashes. Wyke's mother waited at the processing center, and he barely recognized her. She'd aged 20 years in the 2 he'd been gone. Gray hair where brown used to be. Skin stretched over bones, hunger written in every line of her face. She wept when she saw him, touching his face like she couldn't believe he was real, solid, alive. He held her carefully, afraid she might break, this woman who'd been strong enough to raise him alone after his father died. Their apartment survived mostly intact, a miracle in a city of ruins. But survival didn't mean comfort. 3 rooms, cold despite spring warmth, windows patched with cardboard where glass used to be. The furniture looked the same, but somehow smaller, shabbier, worn down by years of making do. His mother prepared their first meal together, watery soup with more water than vegetables, black bread that tasted like sawdust and sadness. She served it proudly, apologizing it wasn't better, grateful to have anything at all. Wyke ate the soup and tried not to compare it to Camp Ruston. Tried not to think about fried chicken and ice cream and abundance so vast Americans threw food into oceans. In Louisiana, the pigs ate better than this, he thought, and the comparison made him sick with shame and anger. Shame for thinking it, anger that it was true. He visited former Luftwaffe comrades in the following weeks, men who survived the war and returned to nothing. They gathered in basements and ruined cafes, drinking ersatz coffee and sharing cigarettes rolled from tobacco and whatever else they could find. The talk always turned to the war, to what went wrong, to who was to blame. Jews, they said, traitors, wonder weapons that came too late, cowardly allies. Anything except the simple truth. Wyke tried explaining once. We were simply outproduced, he said, out-trained, out-thought, out-everything. The Americans had more of everything and used it better. We lost because they were stronger, and we refused to see it. His friends stared at him like he'd grown a second head. One spat on the ground. Amerikanisiert, he muttered. Americanized. corrupted by the enemy, brainwashed by luxury. After that, WWII stopped trying to explain. Let them believe comfortable lies. Let them think Germany lost because of delusion instead of delusion. He had seen the truth in Louisiana, tasted it in ice cream and Coca-Cola, watched it drive past in a teenager's personal automobile. Reality didn't need his friends to believe in it. Reality just was, indifferent to German pride. Work came slowly to ruined Germany, but WWII's engineering knowledge found employment eventually. He joined a firm rebuilding civilian aircraft, helping design planes that would never carry bombs or fight battles. He refused military contracts when they came, politely but firmly, no matter how much they paid. He'd had enough of war machines. Let someone else build tools for killing. Teaching the next generation became his mission. Young engineers born during the war or just after came to learn from men who remembered how things worked before everything broke. They asked about the war because young men always asked, wanting stories of glory and heroism. WWII told them about November 27, 1944, 40 aircraft falling from the sky, and what came after. Understand your enemy, he told his students. We never did. We believed propaganda instead of looking at facts. We thought spirit could overcome steel, that willpower could replace fuel, that superior race nonsense could beat superior production. We were wrong about everything, and it killed hundreds of thousands of us.
The students listened, some understanding, some still trapped in old stories about German greatness and American luck. WWII couldn't argue with them either. Time would teach them, or it wouldn't. He'd done his part by telling the truth. Years passed. Germany rebuilt, slowly, painfully, learning new ways to be strong. WWII married, had children, taught them to question everything and believe nothing just because someone in authority said it. He kept the diary hidden but safe, a record of transformation that might matter someday. In 1987, a historian found him. Young woman, serious, researching POW experiences for a book. She asked about the battle, about the 40 aircraft, wanting tactics and technical details. WWII smiled, tired and old at 67, and told her the battle didn't matter. The real lesson came after, he said. In that American camp, I ate ice cream in January. I watched teenage boys drive automobiles. I saw factories that could bury us in steel and never strain. He leaned forward, making sure she understood. We lost the air war and the whole war the moment we believed our own propaganda. Those P-51 pilots didn't beat us that day. Reality beat us. America was simply what it was, and we refused to see it until we were eating their fried chicken behind barbed wire. The historian scribbled notes, trying to capture everything. WWII waited until she looked up again. I learned more about power in that Louisiana prison camp than in 4 years of combat, he said. Real strength doesn't need to boast. It just is. And it feeds even its enemies, because it can afford to, because the expense means nothing to true abundance. The interview ended, but WWII had one more thing to say. The 40 aircraft we lost in minutes, people remember that as a battle, but it was really a lesson. We were flying the past, and they were flying the future. We just didn't know it until we were already defeated. Months later, his grandson visited, wanting to see the Aviation Museum in Munich. WWII agreed, old bones creaking, old memories stirring. They walked through halls of restored aircraft, machines from both sides, preserved like insects in amber. In one corner stood a P-51 Mustang, silver and sleek, beautiful even in stillness. The boy stared at it, awed by the fighter that ruled the skies his grandfather once flew.
"Did you ever shoot one down, Opa?" he asked, innocent and curious. WWII smiled sadly, remembering November 27th, remembering 40 friends falling, remembering everything that came after. "I tried, boy. We all tried. But they were flying the future, and we were flying the past." He reached out, placing his weathered hand on the Mustang's wing, metal, cool and smooth under his palm. "This machine didn't just win the war," WWII said quietly. "It taught us what winning actually looked like. Not spirit or ideology or racial superiority, just better tools, better training, better logistics, better everything. They had it, we didn't. Simple as that." The boy looked confused, too young to understand, but WWII didn't explain further. Some lessons took a lifetime to learn. Some truths only made sense after you'd lost everything and find it again in a place you thought was the enemy. They left the museum together, grandfather and grandson, walking into German sunlight that warmed a country rebuilt from ashes. WWII never forgot the 40 aircraft, or the ice cream, or the teenager's automobile. He never forgot that power was mathematics, not mythology, and that the strongest nations fed even their prisoners because they could. The war ended decades ago. The understanding would last forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.